Hey everybody, and welcome to Swords, Shields, etc. I'm your host, Arthur, and with me I have Justin, and we have a new host with us. If you'd like to introduce yourself, go
Yeah,
ahead.
these snakes in the grass tried to keep me out, silence me, but now I'm here, and I'm Dan. I'm the etc.
Hi, Dan. I mean, we told you about it, but you didn't say anything,
I
so.
don't know about that.
So yeah, if quick introduction, I guess. If you remember, we were talking about a session Justin and I played in college with our roommate who we didn't name. Dan is that roommate. Um, he heard about the podcast and wanted to join up, and so we're gonna let him join up because I think it's awesome to have more than two of us because we were probably getting boring.
Yeah, I usually keep things pretty interesting between the three of us, so.
Yep. So, why don't you explain, give us a quick background on how much you've played, like D&D and other tabletops?
As far as tabletops go, most of my experience comes from Pathfinder, but I've also played 5e and Masks, whatever system that's based on. Played that, and I think that's it. I've wanted to play a few others, but never really gotten into them. Oh, and we did that 3.5 one.
It's basically Pathfinder, though.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Little differences here and there.
Yeah, so you've mostly played. You haven't GM'd that much, right?
Yeah, I GM'd a game once, I think, and that's about it. Oh no, I GM'd that other game that one time.
Yeah, back in the one that we did with back in college, right?
Yeah, the Murder Hobos
Yeah.
one.
Oh, yeah, Murder Hobo. That was fun.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I lost my weapon really quickly that time, I remember.
Yeah, that's also the kind of player I am. If anybody's interested in hearing about that, I like mechanics, and the most mechanic heavy part of the game is combat. So that's the part of the game I gravitate to most.
Yeah, which is interesting because I tend to, as a player, gravitate to the other parts of the game, like the role play and stuff.
Yeah, it's not that I dislike roleplay or like skill checks or anything. It's just I think it's fun to, um, use the rules and bend them as much as you can within the confines of the rules. It makes things more interesting. It's like a puzzle.
I think that's also interesting in terms of when you're saying, like, using the rules, because there is no general rules for roleplay, but there's always rules for, oh, you need to roll to attack and all that stuff.
Right, because roleplay doesn't need to be balanced like combat is.
Yeah, you don't. There's no one way to do role play. You can all be, oh, I speak in the third person, or we can all speak in the first person. Whereas combat is, no, you need to hit. You can describe it if you want, but you need to hit. You need to roll to hit.
At the end of the day, too, it's a game, so
Yeah, exactly. Some mechanics have to be there.
Well, except in masks, you don't
It's
need
true.
to do any of that for masks. Sometimes you need to roll.
Sometimes you need
Other
to roll.
times you just get
The
to do what
GM
you
never
want.
has to do anything there. He just sits there and is just like, okay, you did it. Great job, guys.
Ranger lad mostly just gets to do what he wants.
Yeah.
and then sometimes you just avoid rolling as much as you can to make sure things happen the way you want them to.
Okay, no. We're not going to roll. What? No. I'm just going to take the easy way out. Okay, well, I guess you succeeded because you took the easy way out.
There's nothing in this world like taking it easy.
Exactly.
So I guess this is a silly question, but because I can kind of answer it myself. But of the systems you've played, which do you think is your favorite?
Oh, it's definitely Pathfinder. I lament the fact that I'm not playing a Pathfinder game right now. I'm only in a 5e game,
We could
and I
fix
hate
that,
it.
Dan.
But I
could
need
fix
I need to
that.
play it because I need to play something.
We could do two people again, you know?
Oh, I don't know.
Spin-off series?
It took so long to finish the first one.
Yeah, but
We'll
now
do
we
a
can do
short
it
one.
from home, so it's just as easy as before.
Yeah, maybe that's something to do down the road. But right now I'm just in a 5e game.
So so obviously you prefer Pathfinder, but like obviously you're playing 5e now. What are the things you like and dislike about it compared to Pathfinder?
So 5e, it's mostly a content issue that I just, like I said before, I like rules, and I like working within those rules and like doing as much cool stuff as possible to like uh go go to the boundaries of like how effective I can make my character at being themselves. So I'd say the primary difference why I like Pathfinder more than 5e is best explained with the character I played, the last Pathfinder character I played, and the current 5e character I'm playing. So, in Pathfinder, most recently, I played an alchemist, a goblin named Gix, and there was so much like content I could use to really like flesh that character out and make him exactly how I wanted him to be, and let him operate exactly how he wanted to operate. And there was, rules that were able to govern all of it. And then transitioning into 5e, I played an artificer because I didn't really like have my fix of being an alchemist yet, and that's pretty much the closest thing they have. And that's really interesting because everything in 5e, like there's not as many, there's just straight up not as many books as there are in Pathfinder right now. So things like item creation and doing things during your free time, there are some like loose rules that govern what you can do during your free time, but I just find it I find it interesting that like it seems like artificers should be able to have some kind of bonuses to crafting, but just because those rules aren't very fleshed out yet, there's no real crafting system, so to speak. There's some very like rudimentary, like you can spend your free time doing this for X amount of weeks and end up with this item, but it doesn't really seem to interact with how you've built your character in any way. Whereas in Pathfinder, all those things kind of interlace and interlock, and you can play off of the rules and how you want to build your character to make things more precise.
Would you say most of that is because probably the feat system helps a lot with that, at least for Pathfinder, or do you think it's like going into the class creation, like, oh, if you're this class, only you can do this because you have this skill that no one else does?
I don't know if it's feats necessarily. I feel like in 5e, when you pick a class, you pretty much like Wizards says, all right, this class does this and this, and that's what they do. No matter you can't even tweak it very much based on how you want to play the class. It's if you're a paladin, you do this, you do healing and damage, and that's what you do. Whereas you can play like 800 different types of. I think it's archetypes. Archetypes are probably
is what makes it different.
What makes it like the big standout thing.
Yeah, because I remember, Arthur, you and I have talked about how in 5e we don't. The RP customization is there, but in terms of mechanics, it doesn't really feel like it in the sense of archetypes, like we've talked before, where it's like, oh yeah, you can be like an arcane archer or something like that, but you can't really do that in 5e.
Yeah, but you could be like a farmer that becomes an archer.
Yeah, exactly. You could do the stuff that isn't necessarily as important mechanically, saying, oh yeah, I was a sailor in the past, but now that doesn't necessarily help you at all. It's just little extra RP things that they've implemented to give you bonuses.
Yeah, it feels like those things that they give you, like my current character is a guild artisan, but that doesn't.
It just says you can work at the guild.
It doesn't come up in the game because I can't actually do anything with it.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of it does come down to the GM, like regardless of which game you're playing. I think Pathfinder, it gives a lot more initiative to the players. Like, I want to do this, I can research it myself. Whereas in 5e, you'd have to go up to the GM and say, hey, I know that this is what the book says, but I would like to do X, and it's just really not doing it. Is that okay? Do we have to like tweak this a little bit? Do you think that's just downright overpowered? I can come up with a new character, something along those lines.
Yeah, and I'm not one to like hate on the rule of cool and letting working things out with the DM. As evidenced by the fact that my artificer has a construct that is a motorcycle that you get a construct at like level 6 and you can build it to look however you want according to the rules. So I asked my GM if I could make it a motorcycle that I ride her out on, and he said okay.
That's pretty rule of cool to me. Yeah,
I would have it still has, there's that rule that I still had to base that on to even ask, because the book says you can make it look however you want, and 5e just doesn't have enough of those little things where it's like it empowers the DM to let you have those things, but it doesn't empower the players to ask for them.
Yeah, and it's not set in the rules either. But do you think that's partially because of the age of the game, or just because Wizards of the Coast is taking the game in a different direction?
It definitely makes things easier to just jump right into. So I think I don't know if it's because of the age of the game, because even when Wizards does offer these things that should be giving more depth to the game, like they put out an Unearthed Arcana PDF with rules on free time, like I said, but those rules aren't really anything in depth, and it reminds me a lot of those things that you can pick with your character. That's your background. Like, yeah, cool. Now my character can work on this, but it takes like 4 months to make an item that's worth like 200 GP. So why would you ever do it? It doesn't give you enough. It doesn't give your character enough distinction for the amount of work you have to put in. Whereas I think in Pathfinder, you can put in a relatively low amount of work and get a pretty high amount of distinction on your character without even consulting the GM.
As long as the GM actually reads through the character sheet at some point and says, yeah, nope, that sounds about right to me. Because I know in Pathfinder, there are sometimes things like, you can't, it's very easy if the GM doesn't know what they're doing to be like, oh, you somehow end up with 4 feats instead of 3. Oh, I just didn't notice.
Yeah, well, it also... things can get less out of hand in 5e because, you don't have those feats you take at every level, and there's no real requirements on them.
Yeah, I think altogether, in response to your question, Arthur, in terms of if they're leading in a different direction, I definitely think they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because they put a lot more focus on new players. It feels like they simplified a lot of it compared to 3.5, which I think is a lot of people's favorite edition. A lot of people go back to that edition, especially from our generation. I know people before ours were like, oh yeah, 2E was the way to go because State Go, and I'm like, the numbers don't make sense there.
Yeah, there's a guy in my group who still swears by first edition, and he'd play first edition if he could find a group for it.
But you're also playing with a very different terms of age group, right?
He's an older gentleman. He's getting ready to retire.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously, like, D&D fans, they're like, the edition wars is a thing, but I do find that it interesting that every time you talk about, like, oh, where are they leading us? Because first it was, like, very number crunchy 3.5, which eventually led to Pathfinder, and then they went to 4E, which a lot of people dislike. I think the main reason people disliked it is very board gamey, is I think the way to put it, is they're like, oh, all the powers don't really do a whole lot, like getting the feats and whatnot didn't make you feel very powerful even outside of combat. It was just a combat only thing essentially. And then 5e, I think they decided to move in the direction of, well, we have games like Critical Role and other like shows that a lot of people are now watching, so there's definitely interest. I think the RP is why people watch those games, not, oh, did you see that person type in the number into roll 20 and they got a 20 off of that. Like, I think in those instances the RP is what drive people in, and I think Wizards saw, oh, there's a lot of people that want that, so let's give it to them. But as a result, they lost all that mechanical, like, difficulty, I think is the best way of putting it.
Which is why I like 5e as a concept, but I very rarely want to play it over anything else. Because I like having that the game that newcomers can get into, and it's simpler, and especially if you're GMing it or if you're DMing 5e, it's a little bit I guess easier for you to be there to help these people when they're learning. But at the same time, because I've played, 2nd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder, I kind of gravitate towards the more customizability in those games rather than want to play a game like a game like 5e, even though it does do a lot for role play. It just feels a little, I don't want to say watered down, but its focus isn't where I would particularly want it.
So let me ask you guys a question. How long do you guys spend your time making your characters for a Pathfinder game? Because I know both of you have played multiple Pathfinder games. How long would you say on average it would take you?
Every time I make a character, it takes me less time.
Yeah, I think that helps because I know you two read, at least you, Dan. I know you definitely read it a lot every time. You're like, oh, I was thinking of a new character idea, and then I hopped onto D20 PFSRD, and next thing, I just came up with a character that I know is possible to do, or something like that.
Yeah, and I like that you have the SRD to like look through. I don't feel you can look through the 5e book, but you're still only gonna find the 9 classes or whatever, and then anything from Unearthed Arcana. There's just not as much out there, and that helps streamline the character creation process. Like I made my last 5e character. It took me like 20 minutes, but um, that something like that wouldn't even be possible in Pathfinder. You'd still be like configuring spells at that point.
Yeah, and I think also having feats, like if you've ever had to introduce the feats list to a new player, you just kind of notice that they're just like, what am I supposed to look at here exactly?
But you can drown in the feats list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The feats you could literally take like just the general on its own. You'd be like, why am I here? What am I supposed to be grabbing?
Which is why I know we talked about it before, Justin, but usually when I make characters, I have some kind of guide open. It's not a guide that's going to tell me how to build the best XYZ, but it's gonna tell me which feats I should be looking at and which feats I shouldn't be looking at.
Yeah, to save you time, and I think that's really useful, especially for Pathfinder, because I don't even know half of the feats. At least I'm like, oh, I know the obvious ones, like yeah, power attack over here. Oh, you can get Iron Flesh if you really want it, stuff like that. But when someone's like, oh, I want this meta magic one, and it's like Quicken specifically, I'm just like, I need to read that because I can't always tell you exactly the answer.
Or all the feats that are just like roleplay focused, and
Yeah.
depending on the campaign you're going into, it's like, oh man, I don't know if I would go with that feat because now you can, I don't know, make 2 people fall in love in the same room.
So let me ask you, Dan, have you ever had to like, do you rely on guides for when you're making a new character, or is it just like I'm just gonna research this?
Sometimes I consult guides. I usually don't follow them. Normally, I build my character and then I take a look at guides, or not really even guides, kind of just Reddit posts, and I Google. There's the Pazeo forums. I do a lot of Control F on the feats list to poke around and make sure there's nothing I could be taking. Like, I'll just Control F like key terms for my characters.
I remember the word charge being very important for your cavalier.
Oh yeah. When I made my cavalier, I would just I started to run out of feats that I knew about, so I just start Control Fing charge on the combat feats page on the SRD.
Exactly, and I think it's really great that they have that. Of course, the game is open source, which is why they can do that.
Yeah.
Whereas Wizards is a bit stricter, and they don't really like sharing that information out there. I know that there's a wiki out there with some of the stuff, but I don't think it's...
Yeah, I have a couple of sites that I use. There's one that it's got all the magic items, which is important for me right now.
But overall, I don't think it's as needed, because it's not like you're going through all the feats lists, you're not going through all the possible race combinations, all the random items that you could keep coming across, just like in general compared to Pathfinder. Even like the bestiary for Pathfinder is like double the size of 5e, so I don't know if it's as necessary to a degree to have that site, at least as of right now.
I think they'll release additional bestiaries for 5e, though. I think those parts of the game are going to continue to grow.
Oh yeah, for sure. So let me ask you, have you heard about Xanathar's Guide to Everything? So from what I understand, it's a new 5e book that basically they do something very similar. Like they start adding in new archetypes to a degree, because in 5e it's like level 3, I think generally, is when your class now diverges between one of 2 things. So they started adding more of those. I know they added more backgrounds, more races, all of those things in terms of content. Like, we got back the Arcane Archer. We got all of those kind of things. And I know a lot of people got excited for that, but do you think at this point it's, like, kind of late? It's like, you finally got Orc as a race after, like, 4 years.
So, what I'm thinking, I don't know, I haven't read the book yet. But what I'm thinking it's going to be is more of these choices that in the end don't really matter. Because with 5e, what I've noticed is that you can take, the 2 divergent paths, but then still end up, like, rolling 2d6s and taking a bonus action, and that's your turn. And that seems to be the case, like, not even just between one class and their two paths, but, like, for every class in the game, everyone still ends... It feels like everyone's just using reskins of the same weapons.
Okay, so I pulled up the list. I'm actually incorrect. It's not out yet. It's coming out next month. I just saw it because I know right now Wizards of the Coast is doing a lot to try and hype it up. So one of the bullet points is over 25 new subclasses for character classes in the handbook, including Cavalier for Fighter, Circle of Dreams, I don't know what that is, for Druid, Horizon Walker for the Ranger, Inquisitive for the Rogue, and many more. And then like new spells, like new randomized backstory options, some racial feats, stuff like that. And part of me is like, I definitely agree with you that it feels like regardless of which way I pick a character, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be like a berserker instead of like a bestial barbarian. I feel I'm still using an axe. That hasn't changed. I'm still not wearing armor. That hasn't changed. I'm going to be doing all the same things a barbarian is going to do, because there's no incentive for me to do otherwise, regardless of which path I pick.
Well, I think the difference though, between this and something like Pathfinder is the idea that if I build a character who is any one of those archetypes, and Dan or you build a character that is the same archetype, that we're going to end up doing and fulfilling the exact same role. And I don't think even with the dividing classes, that might add some flavor, but at the same time, I feel like your role is going to be very similar, and your turns are both going to be very similar. When I feel like in Pathfinder, if I were to build a Cavalier and one of you was to build a Cavalier, we could be very different Cavaliers. Either both how our turn order goes, what abilities we're using, what feats we have, all the way down to how we role play the character.
Yeah, like in Pathfinder, you can build a team of 5 bards that all play like completely different, and you'll all have like crazily different turns. But then like even in my current 5e game where we have 2 paladins, me as an artificer and a sorcerer, all of our turns are pretty much exactly the same. It's just like we all do like pretty similar amounts of damage in pretty similar amounts of ways. Like, yeah, me and the sorcerer do range and the paladins get up close, but we all kind of feel like we can do damage and we can heal, and everybody kind of does everything.
So let me ask you, Dan. I know that we've talked about this before. The power curve in Pathfinder is like all over the place. Like early on, Martial is crazy, and it can still be later on, but obviously later on is when spellcasters start becoming like literal gods, where they're like, I'm just gonna wipe the field now because I feel like it, kind of spellcasting. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a lot closer in 5e?
No, I still think spellcasters are king at high levels. Even now we can... As soon as the sorcerer got Fireball, he started out DPSing everyone else.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was curious about, because you're like, oh, we're all doing roughly the same amount of damage, and I'm just like, maybe the power curve is closer, and I don't know if I would enjoy that as a player.
It's not so much like damage amounts, it's that we all feel like DPS, we all feel like tank, like the roles aren't so defined.
Oh, okay, so it's not like the barbarian get up there. It's not like barbarian get up there and start like getting more, like get more HP because we know that's your role, something like that.
Yeah, because every class is getting all like the entire kit. Like we all have everything.
So would you prefer if, for example, let's go back to Paladin, where you said, oh, you can do damage or you could be like healing. You can do both as 5e Paladin. Would you prefer it if there were like, instead of splitting off in like one of the directions for the oaths, it just became, yeah, you can't heal anymore, but you deal more damage, something like that?
Yeah, I think there should be more differentiation between the 5e classes.
Like something to start locking off abilities. Do you think that would be better, just in terms of a game design standpoint?
Yeah, I feel like I agree. Yeah, I feel like things...
Because it would make it feel more unique, right? Like, I'm playing a paladin, he's playing a paladin.
Yeah, the characters end up being very samey.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure to see how you feel in terms of locking away things as a mechanic on its own. Because I'm always curious on that as a GM, because I'm like, oh, I could modify this, so... Because that is one of the problems with 5e. I find, like, a lot of my players, if they don't pick different classes, I'm like, well, we're just gonna have two people doing the exact same thing. There's nothing's gonna change. One of you rangers could be using a bow, and the other one has low animal, but nothing's really changing here because the animal is actually pretty bad in 5e. At least the base. I know they reworked it to be better, but the base handbook, it was pretty bad to be a Beastmaster Ranger. So sometimes I'm curious on like, would it be okay to like take things away that kind of defines the class as a whole, but would make you more unique in that sense?
Yeah, I think taking away things from classes is like a very important part of making an archetype an archetype. Like the two major ways to, or not the two major ways. There are a couple of different ways you can make a cavalier in Pathfinder, say, and in one of them you don't even ride the animal. You're like a beastmaster.
Oh yeah, you basically became a samurai. I remember that.
And there is like a hunter archetype, and you need to. I think 5e plays it too safe, in which when you diverge into a path, there's too much. The Venn diagram is too heavy, like in the center of the diverging paths.
The other circles are like not big enough.
Yeah, the other like the circle in between the two, there's too much in there, and there's not enough that separate them.
Yeah, I think I can agree for the most part with that. I know there are a lot of people that might disagree with that because they're like, oh no, but a lot of it comes down to RP. Obviously, we're not going to play the same. And it sounds like your group, you guys are very, this is the best way to do damage for my class, so I'm going to do this.
No, not even.
Not even?
We have one of our paladins like uses a scythe and is a dex-based character. And
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the RP is still there. Like, we can
Yeah,
differentiate our characters with RP, but the thing about it is that it all ends up being fluff, and very little of it ends up being flavor.
Yeah, okay. I can yeah, no, I understand that. I think part of that comes down to, at least from a D&D standpoint, is that different damage comes from different, like, weapons. So, therefore, it's like, the flavor isn't as good because of that to a degree. But, again, that's a balance question I can't really say. Because there are, like, systems where the weapon doesn't matter. It's how you roll that makes the difference. But, again, I don't think I'm qualified to say that. Because I know the reason they have to balance it like that is otherwise, well, the dagger hurt as much as the bazooka. So we have to balance it somehow.
I just want to know what's next after 5e. And I know they're not gonna switch it up, and we're not gonna get 6th edition very soon, probably. But I'm interested to see if Wizards of the Coast really is taking this more kind of basic route with 5e, because they know there's a lot of people coming into the game, and I wonder if they're going to make it more complicated for those people once they've gotten used to it, because 5e is a pretty good system for teaching people how the game works, because yeah, everyone's turn looks the same, but that kind of hammers in turn order, that kind of makes you understand how exactly you go about doing your turn. And if everyone's doing it the same way, and there's not that one person who's like, well, I can do all this crazy stuff, it kind of helps you learn the basics a little bit. And I almost wonder...
Yeah, but it gives you nothing to aspire to.
So I think in response to your question, and I agree with you, Dan, in that it doesn't really make you want to do a whole lot more, because everyone basically plays the same. There's no reason to push your own identity, because you're not that different from everyone else, because you do the same thing. But I think in response to your question, Arthur, that I don't think they have to, because games like Pathfinder exist, and they're very strong still. If people want that, they can just go to that. You've already played their game, which means maybe you've bought something, but you understand it. You understand the core concept. Therefore, if they throw out new content, you might bite again. Or you might not, but you'll tell people, yeah, I've played 5e before. And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that more people have played 5e.
Sure. And it is more approachable than a game like Pathfinder.
Yeah. So Dan, let me ask you, because I know we actually started playing at the same time, like in the same group in college. Why did you want to join?
Because it's Dungeons and Dragons, man. It's supposed to be fun.
Everyone like especially in the circle that we're in, it was like, oh yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is a fun game. It's just hard to get into, kind of deal, right? Is that what you heard as well, or?
I didn't even hear that it was so hard to get into. I think we've been talking a lot about the learning curve, and I think it's important to note that like getting into anything requires a certain amount of like learning. I play a lot of card games, as you two know,
Yeah.
and like there's just a certain amount of like basic skills that you have to like things like card advantage that you need to learn to know how to play any card game, and I think that's part of the reason why the learning curve on Pathfinder seems so high, because if your Pathfinder is your first game, not only do you need to learn Pathfinder and its mechanics, but you need to learn things just like table etiquette and like things like that you need to learn how to play any game, and I think that's you can start out with 5e and probably segue into Pathfinder a lot easier because of that.
Yeah, and that's what I look at 5e as, when it comes to playing with new people, is kind of a segue into more advanced systems.
I can agree with that. I either recommend 5e or Dungeon World, which is a very similar game to Masks, just because if I know that they will enjoy the RP more, I want them to be like, no, you're going to be doing a lot more RP in this, and I know you would enjoy that more. Because, again, players, we're all very different players. I know Arthur's very big on RP, Dan, you're very big on mechanics, and I try to balance between the two, but I generally lean towards RP. But, again, I'm a GM, so a lot of it comes down to me. I just want to do something wacky. So, Dan, let me ask you, what did you think about Masks? Because it's a very different game from 5e and Pathfinder.
Masks was alright. I don't think I like a lot of the things I liked about it. Were more due to, I think, the group of people we were playing with rather than the system itself. I'm not a huge fan of like just I had to make like very little rolls to do combat, and I normally just sort of succeeded because I said I succeeded.
Yeah.
And I guess that's maybe you have to learn how to place those limits on yourself, where like, oh, my character would probably fail at this point. But it doesn't really give you any mechanics to work off of as far as like when your character would fail besides the rolls, but that's very up to when your GM wants to make you roll, and it's all very, very loose. But it was fun.
I think especially why I recommend, well, between Dungeon World or 5e, because Dungeon World is similar to Mask, like I've said, is it's definitely the group of people you're playing with and what you're trying to get out of it. As it, like if someone wants to be like, I want to play D&D because I want to understand what murder hoboing is. Well, I'd probably point them in Pathfinder technically if they just want to jump right into that, but
or 4th edition, I guess.
Or 4th
if
edition.
all you want
yeah.
to do is fight.
Yeah, exactly. But
4th edition's the way to go.
Yeah, but 5e is sort of Masks is very RP. Same with Dungeon World, where the combat isn't the important thing. It's like the group dynamics. Because remember, like the very last question I ask at the end of game is like, do you guys feel closer as a group? Did you guys feel like you guys are a team, or are you just like drifting apart?
Yeah, but even so, Masks does feel a lot more like you're writing a TV show with a group of people sat around a table.
Yeah.
Rather than exploring a world with a group of characters and having to fight through intricate situations where the stakes are high.
Yeah, I didn't really feel very like personally connected to my character. My Mask's character was definitely among my cavalcade of weirdos in my head that I've played in tabletop games. He's the one that feels like the least like me.
Mm-hmm.
He was it felt like I was like an outside actor who got to influence him, rather than like I when I'm in a more mechanically heavy game, I feel like I am that character, and I have more stake.
I think part of it comes down to the numbers as well, because when you like get a kill in Pathfinder, you're like, yes, that was me, that was my damage. Whereas in Masks, if you're like, okay, well, I succeeded, okay, well, yeah, you scared him off, or you beat him up, yeah, good job.
I don't know if I feel the opposite. I think I feel the opposite way you do, Dan, about it.
Well, I think for you, Arthur, I think Sonya, your character in Masks, was a lot closer to your personality, to a degree.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that's why it's easier for you to bond, whereas Dordry was very different from most of your characters. As
Yeah,
you said
the
before.
other problem too, I think, when it comes to Masks, I guess I didn't really think about this, is the idea that, like, I kind of was protecting Sonya no matter what. Like, if she was in a shitty situation, I was going to explain why she's not in that shitty situation, or if she was in a in a fight and she was about to get knocked out or anything, any normal person probably would have just got knocked out at that point. But I would choose the options where she didn't, or choose the options where she'd get angry or something like that. Meanwhile, Dordry felt a lot more like the world was affecting him, and there was some stuff he could do to fight against it, but most of the time, if he wasn't trained to fight against that, he's gonna fail.
I mean, let's be honest here, Arthur. The world was against Dordry at basically at the end of the campaign. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, that's true, but I feel like I could have fought it more in Masks because I feel like I have more power over the consequences of my failures.
And I think the choice and the consequences is a very interesting mechanic.
Well, yeah, it's the fact that I can choose the consequences that happen to my character for failing, rather than a game like D&D or Pathfinder where the GM chooses those consequences. That's the big difference.
Yeah, but Masks doesn't give you any reason to choose consequences besides, like, it might give your character a new layer of depth.
Well,
yeah.
To be fair, I think the other two players we played with, at least one of them, was very much into that. Like, there were even times where he just marked himself having conditions because he's like, no, I feel like that with my character. I'm just like, okay, if you want to get closer to being unconscious, go ahead.
I think that's the mindset you have to have going into it.
Yeah.
Is that you have to think about it as, and now I'm starting to lean towards Dan's opinion, actually. You have to think about it as you and a group of friends writing a story that has dramatic tension and has all of this, all these aspects of like, superhero movies that have been coming out or comic books that you've read, rather than think about the character as an avatar for yourself, because then you're just going to keep that thing protected no matter what.
Yeah.
At the same time, I enjoy that because I like writing a story and making that happen. But I can also understand kind of the disconnect between that character and yourself.
Yeah, it just felt like I sort of sent him off, and I didn't really like have a lot of feelings as to whether, because like I kind of knew that Ranger Lad was just going. That was my character's name. Ranger Lad was just going to succeed in pretty much whatever I threw him at, because the way to win at Masks is to just tell the DM that you win.
Yeah.
And there's no reason not to just say, yeah, I win.
And there's no rule for the GM to be like, hey, you're gone. You're knocked out. That's it. Because there's always the choice not to be knocked out.
Well, the only other option is for you to have all of your conditions marked, but that's extremely hard, depending on what's going on.
Well, it's extremely hard. It's extremely difficult when you're in a group where at the end of every session, if you had a condition, we would talk it out and make the rolls to get rid of it. Almost all of us did that.
Exactly. But I think part of it comes down to, like, think about the shows that these are kind of based on, like the comics as well. Like, if you think of, like, Teen Titans, they always win in the end, one way or another. And, like, no one's, like, dead at the end of a fight, generally. There are some exceptions. But you have to have that kind of mentality the same in the show, where it's like, yeah, no one's really going to die here, most likely, but there's going to be character development because they lost or because they won or something.
Yeah, the best, like, most memorable moments I have from Masks are when Sonya and Ranger Lad had a disagreement about whether murdering somebody to save another life is good or not, or is moral or not. It's more character interactions that I remember from that campaign rather than something like Pathfinder, where I remember, pretty clearly. I remember pretty clearly when, or when Dorji took out a big enemy, or when Kimby took out 6 big enemies in one charge. It's like it's kind of like but at the same time, I guess it's also GM style too, because I also remember moments in our Pathfinder campaign that were a lot more roleplay focused.
Oh yeah, because I couldn't throw combat at you every session. Otherwise, you guys say, "No, just why so much? Give us."
I mean, you could have, but it's
that's
mostly
no
my
fun
solo
for me.
sessions that went. Usually, my solo sessions went combatless.
I think for Dan, I think we had a combat session almost every single solo session.
Yeah, probably almost every single one. There were a couple of ones where I had to housekeep as mayor.
Yeah, there were a couple there, but generally there was like a fight I think, in almost all of them.
Yeah, but at the same time, that fighting like gives the element to like of risk or consequence.
Yeah, because you're like, I think, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but for some of the fights, some of them were like, yeah, you guys can take it, and there's a chance for you to win, but sometimes you're going to be battered. Because I know there were some fights where like, we just need to run. We can't win this. Let's just leave. We'll come back another day.
Yeah, and it influences RP because I remember in the first couple of sessions of our Pathfinder game, like my character's entire personality was, let's see how far I can push her just being the best at everything and like acting like her shit doesn't stink. And then eventually she hit the wall in the form of that monk that knocked her on her ass. And that helped like develop her character. Whereas with Ranger Lad, like there's no like mechanical wall to hit, so you kind of have more freedom, I guess, but I don't know if that freedom is good because it's just like, yeah, no, I win.
I think you have to very much get immersed into your character for masks to work, and games similar to that.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to play Masks again with a different group and see if I like the game outside of the group we
With
had,
that
because
group as opposed to what we had. Yeah.
because our group was super good about handling situations about character tension and drama, but also having the comedic side of things as well.
I don't know if I liked Masks or I just liked you guys.
Yeah, I get that.
You know?
That's what I'm saying too. Is like, I'm wondering. That's why I want to try it with a different group.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play like another Mask games for sure, especially since the new book came out. But I think part of it comes down to, for sure, especially games like that, it comes down to the group. I don't think the mechanics themselves lead to a lot. I think they give you the opportunity to be good role players. I don't think it's a system that thrives if you're a bad role player, generally. Which is why I said I can't always recommend it. I have to recommend like a game similar to that, or I have to recommend a game like 5e, because there are just some people that don't want to roleplay, that just want the mechanics, and I can't blame them for that, because that is also a very fun part of the game.
I'd be more hesitant to recommend Masks to a newcomer than Pathfinder, because with you can like know life and practice and learn mechanics, but you can't learn the role playing that's required to do Masks like on your own. The only reason I was even able to keep my head above water in the role play that's required for Masks, and like the sense of controlling a character and making them realistic, was just because I'd played so many other tabletops.
So I think that I have tried games like this with another group of newcomers, and they've played multiple games, but they're really bad with like D&D generally, just because they don't ever remember anything on their own, and I don't want to babysit, because then I'm basically playing against myself, which is no fun. Because then I'm like, oh, what move should I use? And I'm just like, well, you should use that move because it's technically the best move, but I shouldn't be telling you this because it's your character. And when I run into those type of players, I'm like, I think having where a game like Masks, where Rule of Cool is like the most important thing generally, because Rule of Cool will be influenced completely by your rolls essentially. I think it's so much better for those type of players, where they don't care about the combat, like, oh, I don't care about how much I did or if we won or not really. I just care about if I got to play my character and have fun with the others. Like, we just got to do funny voices or something. Or I'm just like, wow, you bastard, how dare you take something from me? And then they get into a fight. In D&D, that could kill someone. And then I have to look at the other person and say, yeah, your character's dead, so we gotta roll a new one, because these guys definitely aren't paying to res you.
Yeah, and you have to remember too that our Masks campaign had 3 people in it with a theater background.
Yeah, so I think that helped quite a bit, though. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I think that's a major part of why the roleplay felt so good.
I don't know. I've done Apocalypse World with another group, and I'd say the roleplay was very strong there as well. But if I put more mechanics in front of them, I don't think it would have gone as well. I don't think they would have enjoyed it as much. Because I have tried. So we're playing with them in Stars Without Numbers now. And part of it is Stars Without Numbers, so I don't know how janky it kind of is, but I do think I think they feel kind of limited to a degree on how much freedom they have, because I'm like, well, you need to make a roll, to even consider doing this. And then you have the stupid roles where we had you against another player, and you're like a computer that is controlling the ship, and then the other person was able to hack with no hacking background just because he rolled higher.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was Mask, I'd be like, well, it's not actually, like, you're going to lose. Like, this isn't something you can do against each other because you're just going to lose.
Yeah, because one of you is a computer, one of you is literally an AI, and the other one has no computer background. Yeah, but he was able to out hack me twice.
And that was purely from the rolls. It made for an interesting story later on, but at the time it was like, this guy can't fail at anything, and we're trying to kill him.
Yeah, so it seems like there's kind of like a spectrum of limiting and of limits and freedom, where Masks is a very free kind of game, but that leads to kind of a disconnect from the game itself and characters unless you're wholly invested in it. And Stars seems a bit more limiting when it comes to what you're able to do, but that also can lead to more maybe not role play focused, but more kind of like out there storylines.
I can agree with that. Yeah, I can see that being definitely the case.
And I guess for sake of argument, we kind of throw Pathfinder in the middle because it's both limiting in the sense that you have there's very strict rules, and there's a lot of rules, and there's a lot of books and all that kind of information, but also it's freeing because there is so much of it that you can kind of stretch out within a class and kind of do what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of this episode so far has been us talking about how great Pathfinder is in general. But I mean, again, I think that's the system. At least I know you and I have played the most of, Dan. I'm not sure about Arthur because I know you've played a lot more.
Yeah,
games.
Pathfinder is great.
I mean, it is your favorite game out of all the tabletops, right? One day I want to find a game that's like, oh, this is very close to Pathfinder, Dan. When I find that game for you, I'll be so happy.
I think it depends on the group too, because like I said, if you have people with a theater background who are more interested in playing in role playing characters and creating a story, and maybe don't want to have to do all the rules, Masks or any Powered by the Apocalypse game is super good for that kind of group. But again, you might have a group that's really into the mechanics and the rules and really, really wants to dig into them and find ways to bend them and shape them. And in that case, Pathfinder might be more your cup of tea. I'd almost put 5e in with a game like Masks and on that side of the spectrum. Or do you think 5e is limiting?
I think it's in between. I think it's in between Pathfinder
and Masks, or do you think
Masks,
it's more limiting like Stars though because of how few options you have?
I feel like in Masks it's a lot not Masks. In 5e it's a lot easier to kind of just like as a GM just say, "Oh, just make me like a strength roll or something like that." Like you could play the entire game without having those skill rolls. You just need the attributes. Say, "Oh, you're trying to outrun one another. Both give me like strength rolls or something like that." But, because you're the warrior, you will automatically have more strength. Whereas in Stars, the bonuses are very hard to come by, which I think is a slight problem when it comes to something in particular like PvP.
And they're so low, too. It's like, the thing is, the reason I was failing those computer rolls is because I've trained my computer rolls up to a +1 bonus. And it starts at a -1 bonus, and you can't really get a +2 bonus, really.
So the problem with that, the reason it's so low, though, is because you use a 2d6. You don't use a d20 like you do in Pathfinder or in D&D.
No, I understand that, but it just seems like, if I roll 2 3s, that's middle of the road, +1 is 7.
Yeah.
And that's one more than middle of the road.
Yeah.
Right? But if what are the chances of the other guy rolling 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? That it's pretty
exactly.
big.
Yeah.
It's almost 40%, right? So it's a little less because it's smaller dice. it's a little easier for characters who have no training in something or no knowledge in something to be able to beat somebody who's
Well, it's really easy to swing it. That's how it
exact.
is.
It's so easy to swing it as opposed to a game like like Pathfinder where you have that D20 and it's
Well,
you
I think
can
Pathfinder's
get
a
like
bit
a plus
different.
18 eventually onto your
But
rolls.
Pathfinder's a bit different in the sense that there are skill checks. So example is, I want to lockpick. I want to open this door with my lockpick. Well, you could take the 20, and you'll open it. But in the case that the DC for this is like 40 for whatever reason, like it's a magical lock that keeps changing on its own, so it's 40. You depending on how high level you are, you cannot do it.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
But I'm saying in a game like Stars, I might be able to do it just because I rolled 2 6s.
Exactly. But see, the concept of skill and stuff like that is just vastly different. Stars Without Numbers gives you a chance, whereas D&D can take that chance and say, no, it's actually impossible for you in this situation.
Which I think is more realistic.
I mean,
to be
yeah,
fair.
it's more
I mean,
realistic,
it's like
yeah.
I feel like if me as a human being were a Stars character, I could roll to code a video game, but in real life, I'm not going to be able to do that because I have no background in
Exactly,
coding.
but again, that's different. There's a different design philosophy behind there.
And not to say that I don't like Stars. I enjoy playing Stars. But I actually really want to play. Is it Starfinder?
Yeah, Starfinder, the new Pathfinder
Yeah,
module.
I really
Or not module,
want to
extension.
try it because it's not that I don't like high fantasy settings. I really do enjoy high fantasy settings, but after playing so much Pathfinder and D&D, I do want other settings, which is why I think Masks was a breath of fresh air for me, and why Stars Without Number was as well, because it's no longer swords, magic, dragons, trolls. It's finally like space battles and aliens and flying ships. So I don't want to talk about Starfinder because I haven't played it, but I really want to try it.
So, I'm curious, Dan, have you heard anything about Starfinder?
Nope.
No.
I know it exists, and
That's
I know
about
I'm
it.
probably going to try to play it one day.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, how Starfinder works, and this is from my brief understanding from seeing other people talk about it and like looking very briefly through the PFSRD, is essentially that what it's taking Pathfinder and then allowing you to basically move it over to Starfinder. So basically, it's just a different setting, and they just give a lot of the tools are towards modifying. So, like, we don't want it to be a troll. We want it to be like a space yeti. Okay, well then we're just gonna give you this so you can modify it and make it fit in this scenario.
Sure, but can I fly a spaceship?
Yeah, stuff like that will exist, of
Okay,
course,
then-
because it is a space game.
Then it's
But-
a different setting.
I mean, I already said the entire, like, a lot of the mechanics are to move what they already have a lot of, which they understand is we have a lot of Pathfinder stuff, and we have a lot of people that like Pathfinder. Why don't we just move that to space? And it's fine.
Sure, so it's Fallout and Elder Scrolls.
I would say differently because Fallout and Elder Scrolls actually have very different mechanics. Like the VAT system and all that makes it quite different, I would say, in my mind. I wouldn't say they're the same, but I would say if you like the idea of the game, then I would try them both.
Yeah, I think what Arthur was saying is more of like Fallout and or Elder Scrolls, or at least the more recent ones, all run on the same engine that Skyrim was built on. So it's like that. It's like they run on the same engine. They're both like Finder games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would agree with that. So that's kind of a complaint to some people because like I want to do like to them they're like, oh no, but I want like newer stuff. But I don't think they fully realize that the great part about Pathfinder is we have so much material. So why don't we just take advantage of it? And I think Paizo did a very good job realizing that that was a huge asset that they had.
Yeah, and you guys know that that's like my number one complaint
Yeah.
with 5e. Like, why didn't they just bring all this stuff over and have it ready at launch? It doesn't make sense to go back to 9 classes when in the last expansion you had more.
Yeah, or to just get rid of orcs as a race for 4 years.
Yeah, that was because
That's just such a weird choice because I feel like D&D and orcs as a race just kind of go hand in hand.
oh, I mean, even in Pathfinder in the like player handbook, they don't have it there. But I definitely understand what you're saying, Dan. And I think if I was going to give a response like in the perspective of Wizards is, we want to make sure that everything we have is good rather than just a bunch of stuff that isn't necessarily good. But again, I agree with you because I would have preferred to be able to, like, I want to play my Cavaliers. I want to be able to play my Gunslinger. I want to play all those things in 5e because I think it would be interesting there. But they just won't let me because...
Yeah, it could always be a sell more books thing, too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you make more money because you sell more books over time, but another thing I think for them is it's balance.
Yeah,
Because
that's what I was gonna
no
say.
game would be good if you have all these options, but there's like 7 of them that are insanely broken and the rest are just severely underpowered.
Sure, but I don't think it takes as long to balance. I'm not going to say it took them 4 years to make sure that Orc was balanced.
Yeah, no, I
enough
agree.
to come
I
out, yeah.
definitely agree, but I think that's a very
I was willing to
small
give
side
them
of it.
that excuse for like a year or two, but if you already have all the content and all, it's only a matter of changing the numbers to make it balanced. I don't know.
Well, I don't think 3.5 ever had something like Gunslinger or that, because you have to remember 3.75 or Pathfinder is Paizo stuff. They can't touch
Yeah,
Paizo
yeah, but
stuff
4th
necessarily.
edition had a bunch of stuff that 5th edition
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
have.
that is true. Yeah, 4th edition had a ton of stuff.
I'm not as familiar with 4th edition, so
Yeah, you
they
could
had,
play like as a
robot
fairy and
people
stuff, and like you could play as golems. It was a very strange time. You could be like a rabbit person. Oh my god.
just bring it over. Just let me play that now.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I think it's just tradition at this point that we start back at the beginning and then we go back up, and I don't think anyone's bothering to like, why should we change it up if it gives us more things to sell? I don't think the companies aren't going to be like, oh, that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, but why can't they just sell it sooner? It's again, we've 5e's been out for what? We said 4 years now. Like
I've
why
just been
can't
using
why
that
can't
number
I
'cause
have
you
those
guys have been
options?
using it. I don't actually know how long 5e's been out.
5e's been out since around 2013. Testing has been out since like 2011, 2012, something like that. But
I'm willing to call it 5 years.
But the reason I think for that would be along the lines of, oh yeah, you have all these, if we put them out, say, every like 3 months, newer players would have a harder time because like now there's another book I have to buy because it just came out with this game that I bought 2 months ago. And I'm having fun with that, so I need to buy this new book.
No, you don't need to buy the new books. Like, you can buy the one that just has the 9 classes, but it's like DLC.
Like, again, but that's kind of the problem people have with DLC. Why can't I get all of it now? Whereas because DLC comes out a lot sooner than, like, Pathfinder books or, like, D&D books, let's be honest, because printing takes a lot longer than just posting the code online, say, download, guys. But I think a lot of it comes down to, oh, yeah, we have all of these classes here. Now, if you want to play all of these other classes over here, you need to buy this other book to get it. And then all these people are like, well, I want the customizability. That's why I buy these books in the first place.
It was 2014, by the way.
Oh, okay, so I was off by a year.
Yeah, well, they did play testing in 2012.
Yeah. Okay, so I was kind of...
So it's been like, yeah, it's still been like they've been working on it for 5 years or more than that, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so... Oh, actually, so Arthur, in regards to 5e, I sent you a link a while back, from the Role Play, YouTube channel, where they had some GMs that are famous on the internet talking to one of the designers of 5e, one of the initial designers.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever finish watching that, or?
Yeah, I watched most of it. I haven't finished it, though.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you got the general gist of what they're like. What is 5e? And a lot of it was like, oh man, please don't ask me that question because I really don't want to get into that. And I think it was very split, at least from two of the GM's perspectives, on like, is D&D good in all situations, or is it only good in certain cases? I know one of them was saying, I only run D&D these days. There's no reason not to, because the homebrew capacity is there, which I do agree is a huge part of it. But then on the flip side, another one of the GMs just said, no, if I want a different system, I'm going to play another system. I shouldn't rely on D&D for everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel.
Yeah, so in regards to that, because we've been talking about Pathfinder a lot, do you think Starfinder in that case is good? Like they're playing off a good idea? In the sense of, oh, we already have that, so let's just make the exact same thing except in space.
No, I think it is. And if you don't want to play Pathfinder in space, but you want to play in space, go play Stars, or go play something. Go play a different game. I really do enjoy Pathfinder's mechanics, and I do enjoy Pathfinder's like playbook and stuff like that. And seeing it applied to a different setting, just having a different skin, is fine by me because sometimes you just want something in space. It gets boring fighting dragons all the time. I think it's smart for them to do that. 'Cause I think it's a move that Dungeons and Dragons won't take, or I don't see them taking. I don't see Wizards releasing.
I mean, there's no wizards in space, is there?
No, and I just don't see them, reskinning Dungeons and Dragons to be anything else, which I think is partially because they're already so famous as D&D. It's kind of the first thing you think of when you think of tabletop RPGs, because it's been around for so long.
I mean, I still have people who don't even say tabletop RPGs. They say, "Oh, we played D&D." I'm like, "No, we played Stars." Yeah, we played D&D.
Yeah, exactly. It's so synonymous with tabletops that I can't see Wizards changing it in any way like that. Which is why if you want something different, there are other systems, because it's one of the first systems to exist, and no one would have made other systems if it was perfect or if it was exactly what they wanted. And so I agree. I'll always go back and play a D&D campaign. Sure, I'll probably use 3.5 if I go back personally, but if I want that high fantasy setting and I want a game that I know mechanically works, well, I'll probably go to Pathfinder, honestly, but the D&D is there. But I think Pathfinder's making the right choice, because if I want a space campaign with mechanics that I understand, that I'm already familiar with, as opposed to Stars, where it's a new system that I don't quite understand how it works, and I don't understand how the math works either, and thankfully, we have a system online that does all the math for us. But if I want to play a space campaign with a system I completely understand, Starfinder is there for me to do that, which is great. And I would like to see even more Pathfinder style games in different settings. It's one of those, because Pathfinder's not one of those. I don't see it getting different editions either. I don't think Pathfinder 2.0 is going to come out. I think it's Pathfinder, and that's it. And they're just going to add stuff to that, and they're going to keep adding stuff to that.
Well, I mean, that's what Unchained was, wasn't it? It was like, we see these classes, they're weak, we're changing them. We're buffing them. We're changing how combat works if you want it to be changed.
Yeah, it's just an alternate rule set, basically.
But the thing is, Arthur, that they do change it. There's even like erratas, like for Pathfinder Society in particular. They're like, that's no longer possible to do. We had to change that for group play. You're no longer allowed to do this combination.
Yeah, but I think it's a difference.
But even then, they have like new books to say you're not, like, this is how we have now changed the rules to prevent this.
Yeah, but it's different because that's more like patching something, and you have to patch a game if you don't want to make a sequel. So it's like how I don't imagine.
That's not true. Frickin' StarCraft 1 exists.
Oh, no,
like, they patched it for ages, and then StarCraft 2 comes out.
Okay, well that was to upgrade more the aesthetic stuff.
Nah,
right?
dude, they changed the entire, like, they changed a lot in that game. Completely new units and all that.
No,
nonsense.
but I mean, so they changed the mechanics entirely as opposed to just tweaking them. That's the difference. You know what I mean? You need to patch a game, but if, let's say, they decide that they want to completely rework how Pathfinder works, yeah, they're not just going to patch it. They're going to make a new book, or they're going to make a version. And D&D is more likely to take those big jumps rather than Pathfinder, which takes the little erratas and little changes.
Well, I mean, let's go talk about the creation of Pathfinder. The reason they made Pathfinder was, one, because support for 3.5 was ending, and two, because, like, we want it to be better. We don't want it to stop here. We want to make a better 3.5. Thus 3.75 was created, or Pathfinder.
Yeah, because Wizards of the Coast decided they didn't want to make a better 3.5. They wanted to make a new D&D. That's the difference.
Exactly. But see, part of that still comes down to that they had to change some of the mechanics for Pathfinder, as opposed to God, what's it called? Frickin' 3.5. Because there are, like, yeah, you could call it patches here and there, but they still changed a lot of it. Like, if I remember correctly...
No, I agree, but I still don't think they're going to release a Pathfinder 2. You know what I mean? I feel like they're more likely to do this reskinning stuff.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to. I think Pathfinder is just going to continue to grow as Pathfinder. I don't think there would be any point, unless they, for some reason, wanted to do a total mechanical overhaul. I think the reason why Unchained exists is because those rules work for the most part with the current rules. It's like you can play an entire game where the only change is that you sub out for the Unchained action economy.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Now that I think about
Those
it,
are just like some optional rules to give groups a little more power, and I think, or yeah, to give groups a little more power to make the game how they want to make it, and I think that's great, and I think that's how, I think that's how like Dungeons and Dragons should just be. I briefly considered a world in which they just like made 3.5 and continued to make 3.5 forever, while also like having like beginners Dungeons and Dragons as like 4th or 5th edition and things like that.
Yeah, that's basically what we have with Pathfinder.
So let me ask you guys, because now this thought is going in my head. If you saw a first-time player, would you recommend them Pathfinder?
If I knew that the GM and other players knew what they were doing, yes.
No, like let's say a completely new group. You're like, I want to introduce all of you to Pathfinder.
But
Would you
I'm
do it?
there.
Yes, you're there.
Yes.
If those people were like prone to getting frustrated or like couldn't, if I didn't think they could keep up with it, probably not. I'd probably just tell them to play 5e, but then maybe we could move on to Pathfinder later if they got frustrated with the lack of character distinction.
Because I think the way Wizards saw it is just that they're like, there's a completely new no one's targeting new players, or no one was targeting new players at that time. Everyone's like, we just gotta play Pathfinder because that is the tabletop role playing game to play. And I think because when they saw Paizo as well making Pathfinder, like there's no reason to compete with them. Let's just make something that everyone will come into at some point. We have the name brand.
Yeah, well, that was the argument I was making earlier too. Is that that's why I see 5e the way ending up the way that it is. I think entirely why, because you have to remember so you take this thing where you're saying, if you would recommend a game to a group from Wizards of the Coast's perspective, they're recommending their game to a group of people who all might have not played it, and they're not going to play with Wizards of the Coast because Wizards of the Coast is a company. They're going to play amongst themselves. So you have to imagine a whole group of newcomers, so new GM, new players and everything coming together to try and play this game. And that's kind of the angle I think they're coming at it from, is they're seeing Pathfinder as this thing that, our 3.5 veteran players really like playing Pathfinder. Let's give the new players who aren't that great something to start off with, so that's a stepping stone. And if they want to go to Pathfinder, and at least they already bought our books, because at the end of the day, Wizards of the Coast is a company that wants to make money.
Actually, here's a question: do you guys own any Pathfinder books?
No.
I own PDF.
Oh wait, yes I do. Yeah, I own PDFs,
Okay.
but I got it off Humble Bundle.
Because I'm just thinking, because it's open source, you never technically have to buy the game. There's no investment you have to make, which I think why it's so convenient to us at the very least, because we have all that information there. But someone has to buy the first book for 5e. Someone has to buy the PDF for some degree for Stars Without Number or Mask. And I think that's really weird to a degree, because it's no one has to buy it except technically Pathfinder could exist because a single person bought the book and just kept the site running because of that.
Yeah, I didn't own any of the books to start out with. I didn't own any of the books for a really long time, actually.
I didn't own the books until I saw the Humble Bundle that had them.
I don't even own the player handbook. I own bestiary stuff because I like the pictures. That's really it.
I got the player handbook just because I felt bad that I didn't own it.
It was a sense of guilt. I've played this game so much. I should at least have this.
Pathfinder has given me so much, I really should just
spend that $60.
I should try for them,
Just help them out a little bit here and there.
No, honestly, I had 10 or 15 bucks sitting around and saw the Humble Bundle and was like, might as well have it just in case. But usually I just use PSFRD.
Yeah, right? That seems like a weird business model in my mind. This is just all I'm thinking about right now. Because, we keep saying, Wizards of the Coast and 5e, they want to make money. That's the end goal of everything they do. Let's be honest here. Paizo, I get confused because they're open source, so we have 2 wikis that we can get all this stuff for.
Nah, they, I think, because, the people who aren't going to pay for a book are not going to pay for it. So Paizo's idea is we want them to play anyway because maybe they'll bring someone into the fold that will pay for the book. Whereas Wizards of the Coast still thinks like by trying to charge me for the book that I'm never gonna have the book, but I have the book.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing here online, I just did a quick like Google search. Paizo's more likely to make money off of their adventure releases than they are off their core rule books.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
makes
PFS
sense.
is like way more prevalent than I don't even know the name of the adventure path thing, the module
Yeah, I
for
don't
uh,
know
for
any of
5e. It's like Adventurers Boys or
Yeah.
something. I don't really
It seems
know.
like most of the money they make are coming from those adventure books rather than core rule books because again, it is all online. But I mean, it has to be working, right? So
I mean, they're still putting out content, so the business model must work somehow. Because I'm just it's like it's a weird thought that yeah, everyone could be playing this because a single person decided to buy every single book and was like, I'm going to make a website now.
yeah. Well, they also make a lot of other stuff aside adventure books and core rule books too. Don't they have a whole
Yeah.
like they don't do miniatures, I don't think, but
I mean, they technically have a card game as well, but
And they license to video games. And
yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, it's a lot bigger than just Pathfinder itself. They have a lot of other things that lend towards it, not just the books. But so the reason I asked you about you guys owning the books is because I was curious if you guys have ever played modules before. Because I haven't. I have not touched a single module in my entire life.
I've played in modules. I haven't. I've run one or two modules back in high school.
Modules for Pathfinder or modules for like
Just in general.
larger.
Just in general.
Yeah, I've played 5e modules and Pathfinder modules because I've played in PFS.
So what did you guys think?
They're good. I don't.
Yeah, I don't mind them. It's
Yeah, I don't mind them either. They're just good.
it feels more like playing a traditional video game. But that's not bad.
Yeah,
you
if
know?
you want to get together with a group of strangers and roleplay, which like it happens, because like, you know, we're not in college anymore. We can't you can't really have that custom game anymore with like the adult world and stuff. It's very hard because you have to have the DM that can actually like homebrew the whole universe and get people together at a time.
You mean get a drink and just start saying stuff? That's not too hard, Dan.
Yeah, Justin. Not everyone can be you though.
You just gotta hope that you can remember it for next session. That's my only problem.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you have a GM who's confident. If your GM isn't that confident in the system, having a module is super helpful for that.
So I know you have said that when you GM'd, you used it and you mostly rely on those.
Yeah.
How about you, Dan? Would you be interested in GMing a module as opposed to making your own kind of thing, or?
You know, I'd use a module if I didn't have time to prepare.
Because you've GM'd once or twice, right? So do you think you would prefer to use a module where everything's kind of there and you're like, oh, I just don't like this monster, so I'll just swap it out? Or something?
In an ideal world, no, I wouldn't use a module. I'd make my own stuff. I just think it's better that way.
Yeah, because
It's more fun.
you're a bit more invested as well as a GM, I find.
Yeah, you get more out of it.
You come up with an interesting encounter or something, and your player's like, wow, that was really cool. Feels like it's a lot more credit goes to you than I just took it from the book.
At the same time, it's a significant time investment, so I understand why modules exist, and I will probably use modules in the future.
Yeah, to be fair, I used modules in high school when I was first starting to play the game with other people, you know?
Yeah, they're useful as a starting GM, for sure. For sure. Not everyone just gets thrown off into the deep end and says, I'm going to make a world because I can.
Yeah, or even just like as a GM who doesn't have infinite time.
Yeah, there are a lot of note-taking GMs that out there. I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to write, man. They look at my notebook like, what does this number mean? Oh, that's someone's ID number. Turn 3 pages later. Oh, that's his ID number.
It's just a useful tool if you want to play a game, but no one really wants to be like the designated GM.
So, Dan, do you prefer being a player or GM? Because I know Arthur and I already have our preferences.
Oh, I prefer being a player, absolutely.
Is it because of the time commitment or because you like being a character?
I like being a character. I don't like being a world.
You don't like so. I think in terms of combat, because I know you've GM'd at least one Pathfinder. Was the combat more fun as a player? Is that why? At least in that aspect.
So when you're a player, it's kind of It's kind of like the GM has prepared this whole scenario, and you get to use all the tools at your disposal to like work through that scenario, and I find that a lot more satisfying because like as a GM, your goal is like your goal is simply just to have let the players have fun basically, and I think it's much more like satisfying for me to have that like it's pretty selfish, but like I kind of just like working through a scenario to have fun rather than like presenting that scenario to everyone else.
Or completely destroying whatever the GM has planned, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's me to a T. I love destroying anything the GM sets up for me.
Okay, so we're having this big fight. Okay, so how many of these are druids? Okay, you guys are fighting all of them at once. I see how this is. Okay.
No, I enjoy playing in the GM's world because I enjoy kind of fighting the GM. I see it as like a not a competition, but like it's I'd rather be a player, a person versus the world than a world versus a group of people.
Okay, that again, that's not my opinion. Just because I'm almost always the designated GM of my own decision.
Yeah, but you like doing it.
Yeah, I enjoy doing it, but I'm always curious on like why other people like. Obviously, there are more players than GMs out there because that's just how the nature of the hobby goes. But
Even
I'm
when you win as a GM, you lose because like
I've made my player. We've ended the campaign. They killed my final monster.
yeah, because like the campaign is like a success when like everyone's having a good time, but like if I was a GM, like success would be like nobody can beat my monsters, but it wasn't unfair. And that's just kind of hard.
The giant just squished you. I'm sorry, guys. You shouldn't have told him to hurt his employer. Something like that with Elgain. Oh, that would be a very different campaign. Elgain just said no and started fighting you guys instead. Ooh.
So at the end of the day, this whole episode was about how much we like Pathfinder.
Yeah, no, but again, I think a lot of it still comes down to like design philosophy to a degree on like why we prefer Pathfinder over everything else.
Yeah, I mean we're not just like shilling for Paizo right now. Although if they wanted to give me any free stuff, I would definitely accept it. Yeah, I'll sell out on my first episode here. I'm really not above doing that. But
Yeah, we're like trying.
It's always
we
important to
always
have
try
one
to
person
sell
do
out
that.
at least once a little bit. We just name drop people and whatnot.
But the thing about it is like just that's the reality of it. Pathfinder like finds itself like right in the middle of like it's got a lot of mechanics, but like it also allows you to role play and things where it's just good.
Yeah, I don't hate the other systems too. Just
Yeah, I mean, I've still
just
played a
Pathfinder
bunch of
has
them.
those options. The plumbers are back, so we should probably wrap
no.
up.
Well, we've been going on for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's some
Yeah, I
parts
think
where
that's
we
good.
can edit
And-
out.
and
just
I got-
'cause it's
yeah.
white noise.
Anyway, so end of the day, Pathfinder's good. All the other games are good too, but that's that. That's the end of this episode.
Yeah.
I guess.
And end of thought. Pathfinder good, everything else good. It's play more tabletops.
Exactly. And thanks, Dan, for joining us and stay.
Yeah.
Stay so we have a third person. That way it's not just one person asking the other person one question.
No, honestly, I think it runs a lot smoother.
I agree.
Yeah, so let's hear the comments and stuff about that because I'm curious to see what other people think. I'm pretty sure they're bored of just you and me, Arthur, so...
Yeah. After 3 or 4 episodes of just us. Anyway, so that's the end of the episode. Links, will be in the description to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud. Hopefully iTunes, Spotify, Google Play is coming eventually. I'll put a link into the video Justin was talking about before, just so you can go and watch that yourself.
I think that's a video mostly GMs will enjoy, but there might be a few players here and there that enjoy that kind
No,
of
I mean I enjoyed it. It's worth looking into.
It's an interesting way to look at 5e.
Yep, and you know how to contact us. Our email swords.shields.etc@gmail.com. If you want to join the Discord and ask questions there, that's great too. Hopefully you're having a good time, and that's what matters. So thanks. We'll see you next week, same time, same whatever method you used to watch these things.
Why would they want to email us?
Oh, I don't know.
Dave,
I
some people
always
still
say
live
it.
in the past.
Alright,
Okay,
yeah,
just
whatever,
don't
fine, yeah,
look.
Email us. Email me
You
at
could
2 in
do,
the
yeah. You
morning.
can contact us any way
Look, there
any
might
way
be some
you
old
want to.
timers who love the game.
I'll open up a PO box in the couple towns over, and you can send messages to the PO
Exactly.
box
There
if
we
you
go.
want to.
If you want to send us free stuff,
Yeah,
we're talking about you,
Paizo, take
Paizo.
note.
Sure,
We're talking to you.
If you want to pick up a carrier pigeon, I have like 3 or 4. And if you want to, smoke signals, I'll answer those as well. Not Morse code though. I don't know Morse code.
Just be sure it's only to Arthur, not to the rest of us.
Yeah.